we are going over our top 50 fantasy football rankings for 2024. This is my first big crack at the top 50 of my top 50, and then as the offseason keeps going on and when we go in through our OTAs and training camps, then I'll upgrade as we go. So the very first guy we're talking about, we're not going to waste any time here. We all know it's Christian McCaffrey. The dude is absolutely consistent as it gets. He's giving you top end fantasy numbers week in and week out, and he kind of canceled over all of those injury concerns that he had in previous seasons. He played in all of his games last season, and he was phenomenal in almost all of his games. You can count on Christian McCaffrey to give you that top end type of numbers. Let's just see how he finished last season. Christian McCaffrey ended up with 1,459 yards rushing with 14 touchdowns on top of 564 yards receiving and 7 touchdowns on top of that. Whether you're in a PPR league or half PPR league, you are loving having Christian McCaffrey. He is by far the 101 in every single draft, no matter what you're doing. If you're playing best ball, he's the 101. If you're in any type of redraft leagues, he is the 101. The only time he won't be going the 101 is if you're playing in a dynasty league, but these rankings are for redraft. So we clearly have Christian McCaffrey as the 101. So somebody going in at the 102, then my number 2 guy in the top 50, we're going CeeDee Lamb. He showed out last year that he could be the stud that we all knew that he could. Coming into the NFL, he had people like Amari Cooper on the outside really just holding him back, and they needed to kind of expand for that. Now he is the bona fide number 1 with only Brandon Cooks there as the number 2. Jalen Tolbert's kind of getting a little bit better. He'll probably get some more reps in this coming up season. But no one is competing with CeeDee Lamb, not even on his team, but even in the NFL as the number 1 fantasy wide receiver, in my opinion. Somebody you can slot into your matchup no matter who he's going against, and he's probably going to come out ahead of most people in any given week. Let's just look at what he did, the phenomenal season that he had last season. CeeDee Lamb ended up with 135 receptions for 1,749 receiving yards and 12 touchdowns on top of that. Like I said, he was dependent not only on the yards but in the receptions, but also the touchdowns as well. He was showing out week in and week out, and if you had him in your Super Bowl game, you probably won your championship. CeeDee Lamb easily the number 2 guy for me. Let's go over the third guy. We're talking about Tyreek Hill, the ultimate boom type of play. He can win a week with 50 points at the wide receiver position. He is just absolutely incredible. Tua throws him the ball all over the field. He even hurts Jalen Waddle's kind of numbers a little bit because of how dominant Tyreek Hill can be when he's coming over from the Chiefs. People are wondering, can Tyreek Hill still be Tyreek Hill? It doesn't matter who's throwing the football. At this point, Tyreek Hill is just that good of a guy. Let's just look at what he did last season. Tyreek Hill ended up with 119 receptions. Let me say that again, 119 receptions for 1,799 yards and 13 touchdowns on top of that. I'm telling you, Tyreek Hill can single-handedly win you a week in any given week, and I love him for fantasy football. Easily my number 3 target for any given week. I think that he's right below CeeDee Lamb in my rankings just based on the consistency of CeeDee Lamb and his targets. There may be some week they may focus a little bit more on Jalen Waddle than Tyreek Hill, so that's the kind of what I use to determine who's going to be number 2, who's going to be number 3. Either way you go, both of these guys are absolutely phenomenal. I like both of these guys. Let's look at the number 4 guy right now in my top 50 rankings. We're going Amon-Ra St. Brown, the wide receiver for the Lions. He's another guy, especially if you're in a PPR league. He likes to play a lot in the slot as well. He's doing a lot of dink and dunk type of opportunities, gets a lot of receptions, a lot of individual plays to make something happen to get you those extra fantasy points. Jared Goff is looking at Amon-Ra St. Brown almost every single play. You love having him on your fantasy roster as he's going to be able to produce consistent numbers week in and week out. Let's just look at what he did in 2023. Amon-Ra St. Brown's had 119 receptions, just like Tyreek Hill, 1,515 yards and 10 touchdowns on top of that. Now, Amon-Ra St. Brown, like I said, if you got this guy, trust me, you're not batting an eye at this dude because he is putting up some solid numbers for you. He is clearly on top of his game. Even when he came into the NFL, he remembered all the people that were drafted ahead of him because he's like, I'm better than where I got drafted at. I'm going to prove it to the NFL. He has done nothing but proven since he's had this opportunity. So whenever Jameson Williams came into the show, he was supposed to be the number 1 wide receiver, but since he ended up with that gambling problem and missing it, Amon-Ra St. Brown stepped up and showed he was the one. He is not relinquishing the number 1 wide receiver role for these Lions. He is a big reason why they made it far into the playoffs, and I think he's going to continue to be the reason why they succeed, and ultimately probably a decision that you're going to have is, do I need to draft this guy? And I'm saying, yes, you do. Get this guy on your team. You're going to love having this guy week in, week out. He has consistency on the offense, and he's a big part of the offense. Well, we're going to here at number 5. The next guy on our list, I'm going to have to say Justin Jefferson. Now, Justin Jefferson just last year was probably ahead of a lot of people here, probably at the number 2 spot, right below Christian McCaffrey. But here's some things, right? Justin Jefferson's got some things that are going against him at this point, and mostly because no more Kirk Cousins, right? We're looking at either Sam Darnold or the rookie J.J. McCarthy coming in and trying to produce numbers for Justin Jefferson. Now, he can do it. He's got the talent. When we saw Kirk Cousins get hurt later on in the season, you still saw a 20 points games, coming from Justin Jefferson just because he is that talented. Let's just look at what he ended up with for 2023. Justin Jefferson ended up with 68 receptions, 1,074 yards, and 5 touchdowns. We got to remember, Justin Jefferson did miss some time of his own, but when he's on the field, he was productive. Didn't matter who the quarterback was. Now, can that be a consistent thing week in and week out? I'm not sure what's going to happen, but we'll have to see how it all plays out. I think Justin Jefferson still belongs in the top of the rankings, and I still think he can do a good job. Let's go and move on to the next guy. Number 6, we're talking about Breece Hall, that running back for the Jets. Breece Hall, right? They said Dalvin Cook was coming in, right? Will there be a competition here? Not with Breece Hall. Breece Hall shown that he was the man. There was nobody taking runs from him. Doesn't matter if it was Dalvin Cook or anybody else. He was producing at a high level. When you got him on your team, a lot of people was like, man, he's coming back from a big injury, right? He tore a lot of ligaments in that knee, and yet he was still productive. He did a lot of things that a lot of people didn't think he can do. He's shown he is healthy. Coming into 2024, he is ready to go full steam ahead. There's nobody else in this backfield to give him any competition. Let's look at what he ended up with in 2023. Breece Hall ended up with 994 rushing yards, 5 touchdowns, alongside 591 receiving yards, and 4 touchdowns on top of that. Breece Hall, a consistent running back for you. He's a top dynasty back. He's a top redraft league. It doesn't matter what you're in. Breece Hall is definitely one of the top backs you can have on your football team. Let's go over here at number 7. Go over the next guy. We're talking about Jahmyr Chase, and it could even get better even in 2025, right? If T. Higgins ends up moving along. So as of right now, it's Jahmyr Chase show, right? T. Higgins, you're probably going to expect him to miss a lot of time anyway. If he gets injured at all, he's probably going to be like, I'm too injured to play. I'm sitting out, because he knows he won't be with the Bengals. Why would he give the Bengals everything that he got? So that just leads Jahmyr Chase to be the man. Looks like Joe Burrow will probably hyper target Chase a little bit, because he knows, why do I need to keep T. Higgins happy? He's not going to be here anyway. Let me keep my guy Jahmyr Chase happy. So I look for a really big season from Jahmyr Chase, albeit as long as Chase and Burrow can stay healthy. I think this could be some fireworks. Let's look at what Chase was able to do last season. We see that Chase had 100 receptions, 1,216 yards, and 7 touchdowns. Like I said, he is a phenomenal wide receiver, and he was once right next to Justin Jefferson as the 2, the 3 type of guy just last season. We can't forget how hyped we were on Jahmyr Chase. Let's not drop him too far down into our rankings. He is still a stud of a wide receiver and still a top tier guy for your fantasy team if given the opportunity. Let's move on to the next guy. We're talking about at number 8. We're talking about Bijan Robinson. Now, I know a lot of guys are probably not as high on Bijan, but we have to remember Arthur Smith, the head coach, is now off. He's over there with the Pittsburgh Steelers. We have a new regime, and a new regime that's probably going to focus on the running back position. They do have Kirk Cousins, so they're not going to be able to stack the box against Bijan Robinson. They're going to have to be honest with Drake London and Kirk Cousins and Kyle Pitts throwing the football all over the field, right? So what's this going to leave? Bijan Robinson have plenty of rushing holes to just lead the way, scoring plenty of fantasy points for your roster. Let's look at the disappointing season that Bijan had last year. Bijan Robinson ended up with 994 yards rushing, 5 touchdowns, along with 591 receiving yards and 4 receiving touchdowns on top of that. Even with the putrid season that Bijan Robinson, the underutilization that happened with Arthur Smith and Bijan Robinson, he still almost had 1,000 rushing yards. That is going to be phenomenal. You can easily see him clearing 1,000 rushing yards this season with the new regime. They're going to be utilizing Bijan Robinson, using the tool set. He's one of the best running backs to come out of college football in a very long time. They have to use that. They have to get him on the field and give fantasy points to their fantasy owners. I see plenty of that action here in 2024. Moving right along here, we're going over the number 9 guy. We're talking about A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown, another guy, right? It's just, if they didn't have Devonta Smith on the team, I'll be probably even a little bit higher on Brown as it is, but there's some weeks that he's almost absent because they want to focus Devonta Smith a little bit more. I think there is a good connection between Hurts and A.J. Brown. Look for them probably take a little bit more of a step back, I think, in 2024 with the retirement of Jason Kelce. I think it's going to hurt the entire offense more than what people think, just my opinion. I don't think A.J. Brown's a bad wide receiver whatsoever. Obviously, I have him at number 9 on my overall rankings, and I think he's going to produce stud type of numbers yet for you again in 2024. Let's look at what he did last season. A.J. Brown ended up with 106 receptions, 1,456 receiving yards, and 7 touchdowns on top of that. A.J. Brown has proven he is going to be a stud for years to come. He's been a stud for years in the past. I think it's going to be absolutely phenomenal what he can give you, even with the decrease or the decline of the Eagles offense. I still think A.J. Brown's going to be a nice overall kind of player for you. Now we're going to end off this video. This is just going to be 1 through 10 here, and we got our 11 through 20 coming up in the next video. But I'm going to say Jahmyr Gibbs at number 10 here. Now, he could probably be a lot higher on this list, but it's David Montgomery was what holding him back, right? As long as you're like in the 5, David Montgomery's probably getting that touchdown. So if Jahmyr Gibbs is going to score, he's got to score from outside the 10-yard line just to give him an opportunity. Now, that's a good thing. That's a bad thing. It's a good thing when you talk about the NFL, right? They love having 2 backs. But as far as fantasy football goes, if you have Jahmyr Gibbs and you're spending a high draft pick on this guy, you want him to be able to punch in the ball at the goal line. That's really not what Jahmyr Gibbs is used for right now. That's all David Montgomery. But let's just look at what Gibbs was able to do in a limited type of role last season. Gibbs ended up with 945 rushing yards, 10 touchdowns, with 316 yards and 1 receiving touchdown on top of that. Like I said, he has more of a split role with David Montgomery, and I really hope this season they start to utilize Jahmyr Gibbs a little bit more and his skill set. Him and Bijan Robinson were the top 2 talents in the NFL draft, and yet neither one of these guys have been used the way that I think they need to be used in fantasy football. Jahmyr Gibbs, if you put him on your team, I think he could be a valuable asset. Again, as long as they're not using David Montgomery like they did last season. We think that David Montgomery is not that good a runner. He's a really good running back, right? And he just so happens to be hurting Jahmyr Gibbs' fantasy value. But I know the NFL coaches, they don't really care about the fantasy football player's value. They were about winning football games, and that's what they're doing. I just know as a fantasy football owner myself, I just wish they utilized Jahmyr Gibbs in a different level. But guys, that is my top 10 fantasy football players as of right now. We're going to be popping out an entire series for our top 50, so be on the lookout for the next video that we release. It's gonna be 11 through 20 that you see, and we'll go over those guys. Make sure you're hitting the subscribe button if you're not subscribed already, and hit a like button. Leave a comment down below. What do you guys think about my top 10? Is there anybody that you guys believe should be in my top 10 that I left out? Like I said, make sure you're hitting the subscribe button. We're moving right along to 1,000 subscribers, so I really appreciate you guys watching the video all the way through. I can't wait to see you guys on the next video. We'll see you guys next time.